So I guess my first question I wanted to see where your initial interest in acting came from. Were you a fan of movies as you were younger, and what kind of movies were you watching that sort of influenced you to want to pursue acting?
I was in high school. Well, my interest in acting came pretty early. I have three older brothers, and they were all in plays in high school, and they used to come home and talk about, all the crazy antics they had doing theater in high school, and that sort of sparked my interest because, I admired them and wanted to, emulate them. And so then I went in, they're all a year apart, and I'm 9 years behind them. And so when I became their age, I went full throttle into drama and did school plays and stuff like that. And when I was in high school, I started watching movies with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino. And it's funny because my career is as far on the opposite side of the spectrum as from those guys as you can get. But that was, it was those guys, the actors, studio actors, De Niro, Hoffman, Pacino, Robert Duvall, Gene Hackman. Those were the movies from the 70s, which I consider the golden age of cinema for American film. And then, and also Woody Allen. I was obsessed with Woody Allen movies. I must have seen Sleeper. I don't know. I mean, I was about to give you an exaggerated number, and then I realized, well, no, that's close probably to the actual number of times I've seen Sleeper. Yeah, and you can sort of see that too if you watch the pilot of our show Dark Minions.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about that because I'm in process of checking it out, and I wanted to see how that whole thing came about. What was the inspiration for that?
Well, my writing partner, John Ross Bowie, who is also I'm not sure how much you know about us, but he and I are both recurring characters on The Big Bang Theory. And
I've never heard of that show.
Yeah. It's a sports show. And we actually had known each other. It's just a coincidence that we're both on that show. We had known each other for years before then and been writing together. But one of the first things we wrote together was, it was actually, we intended it to be a live-action show in the similar vein to Red Dwarf, sort of.
Okay.
John and I, when we were sort of both, had day jobs to support our, acting unemployment back when we lived in New York, we both worked at giant, nefarious corporate firms on Wall Street, doing temping and computer consulting and that kind of stuff. And so we had this common background, and really the project started, I think one day I sent him a sketch of something that I thought would just be I didn't even intend, to turn it into a half-hour script. It was just an idea about the sort of mundane, bureaucratic aspect of what it would be to live what it would be like to live on an evil space station.
Okay.
And then he sent me back. He liked it, and then he sort of added to it. And I can't remember if he sent back the next. I think he just wrote the next scene. And we immediately realized that we had this sort of common vocabulary. We're both sci-fi nerds. We both have the shared vocabulary of the corporate world. And it was one of the easiest scripts, I think, that either of us have ever written. It just sort of, dropped out of us. That we intended to be a live-action thing that we would star in, although we were both, thinking that realistically, if the thing ever did go, we would never get a chance to star in it. So we also wrote ourselves in little, bit parts, backup bit parts as well.
Sure.
So Sony optioned that, and the major networks all turned it down. They said it was too high concept And, I guess they were right. There's nothing, the only other live-action thing like it was like a British show that, they weren't about, that, networks weren't about. That's not good enough for for CBS to start spending, millions of dollars on a pilot for. So we thought it was dead, but it did get us a couple of other writing deals after that. And then John's manager. My God, I feel myself going way into the woods here. But let me just continue. Okay. So anyway, then at one point, John's manager suggested that we pitch it again as an animated show, and he brought it to Amazon, and Joe Lewis and Sarah Babineau, who are running the Amazon Originals program, they really connected to it, and they loved the idea of it as an animation. In fact, it was their idea to do it as a stop-motion animated project, which I was head over heels about because I love stop-motion. I mean, one of my favorite all-time movies is Coraline.
Sure.
And I love,
I'm sure you've seen, like, the Frank Bickford stuff, right? The Frank Zappa stuff?
Yeah. I've seen, I love that stuff, too. I've always loved that stuff. I even loved Gumby.
Yes.
And
Eddie Murphy or Gumby himself?
The actual stop-motion Gumby.
Gotcha.
And Eddie Murphy. So, yeah, that's how we wound up doing that with Amazon, and we hooked up with Shadow Machine Studios. They're the studio that did Robot Chicken.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been amazing to see this script, especially this script, which is something that, wasn't like a commission. It wasn't like us trying to come up with what, would sell to networks, which is basically, we've since discovered is basically anything that has like a bunch of 20-something-year-old kids or something about a family. If you go outside of those parameters, we have learned, you've got a really steep uphill battle.
Sure.
To get something done. Not to say that we haven't still tried to do that, tried to force, a show.
Sure. One of the things, I was looking at your Twitter account today, and, of course, the sense of humor and Dark Minions. I mean, do you think your sense of humor comes from, growing up and liking Woody Allen, or do you think it comes from some place completely different?
Woody Allen is definitely a big influence for me and for John. Other influences are, that's a good question. I like, there have been, I guess, American television sitcoms, everything all the funny stuff that I grew up with. And that said, I'm not that big of a fan of sitcoms. I never really have been. There have always been maybe one or two. Even now, aside from Big Bang, what do I like Modern Family,
mm-hmm.
But I'm a tough audience.
Sure, right.
Myself,
And Woody Allen-wise, do you have a top 5 favorite?
Well, let's see. Not off the top of my head, but let's see if I can do this off the top of my head. Well, there's Annie Hall. I mean, mm-hmm. Annie Hall. That's the top 3. And then, are we talking just comedy, or because there are movies? Some of the movies like Hannah and Her Sisters.
Sure, you can do any.
Sisters is a masterpiece, Husbands and Wives. But for his early, sillier movies, there's Sleeper, of course, and Take the Money and Run.
Right.
Those are probably my favorite of the early silly Woody Allen. But yeah, the main ones are the ones that I think are just crown jewels, like American Treasures. Sorry, that's asshole. I would say Annie Hall, Broadway Danny Rose,
mm-hmm.